Thank you very much, Mr Deputy.
McDonald, sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's a great pleasure to follow the chair of the Select Committee. I do very much look forward to seeing what the Honourable Member for Oakland and South Perthshire has to say as well. I welcome and very much agree with much of what the Minister has said. Also echo one or two of the concerns raised by the Shadow Minister, including in particular with respect to the powers under Article 24 in relation to delegated powers. And I'll raise one or two further concerns later on. Like other Brexit-related legislation, these draft regulations are pretty technical and perhaps not the easiest or most exhilarating of reads. But like other members have said, they do have a very important aim, and they can contribute to making life more difficult for those regimes that continue to systematically practice torture and implement the death penalty, and that do so using products that are traded and shipped internationally. Domestic export bans have helped tackle this. And the so-called torture goods regulation is the EU's equivalent of that. And so it is vital that we retain and even build on those provisions banning import and exports of goods that can only be used for torture, and establishing a system of licensing for goods that, while can have legitimate uses, can also be used for torture. So not only are these provisions consistent with Convention rights, as the Government is obliged to state, they can in fact, in a small but significant way, help enhance protection of those rights all around the world. But the one other problem that I wanted or an issue that I wanted to raise, Mr Deputy Speaker, relates to something that's set out in the explanatory notes, where it is stated that one of the changes being made by these draft regulations is that the inter-member state notification requirements are omitted. Now, these notification requirements are found in Article 23 of the Torture Goods Regulations, and they require member states who turn down or annul authorisations to trade in goods that can be used for torture to notify other member states and the EU Commission of that fact. And that means other authorities can be alert to applications from the same traders and be alive to the issues that have led to the original refusal or annulment in the first place. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I would question why that notification requirement should be completely removed from these draft regulations. Yes, I accept, of course, that it is a reciprocal arrangement which the Government has the power to correct under the Withdrawal Act, but I don't see any good reason why it should be corrected by being taken out altogether. This is not a typical Brexit-related reciprocal arrangement where we're otherwise going to be left under an obligation for no good reason at all or to the benefit of the EU. In this case, there is a very good reason to continue to notify EU member states and the Commission, and the beneficiaries of those notifications would, of course, be those who would otherwise be on the receiving end of torture if such applications were successful there. So I somewhat regret the query why the requirement to notify has not in some way been preserved, and it would be useful to hear more about whether the Government will be seeking to work to come to a similar arrangement with the EU and other member states in future. And could I also, Mr Deputy Speaker, ask for reassurance that more generally the Government will ensure that this country continues to play its part in tackling trade in torture goods, including through its membership of the Alliance for Torture-Free Trade. That's an initiative of Argentina, the European Union and Mongolia, which brings countries together around the world with the aim to end the trade in such goods. It promotes controls and restrictions on the goods, best practice, exchange of information, coordination to support monitoring and enforcement, and technical support for countries wanting to take such measures. The UK is a member state in its own right, not simply through the European Union, which is obviously welcome, but I hope the country will continue to be an active member of that organisation. But in short, Mr Deputy Speaker, these regulations are important and they do have our full support, but we must do all that we can to inhibit regimes around the world perpetrating torture and enforcing the death penalty. Thank you.